health. Her heart is fragile.
Annie Guthrie and her husband were the last known individuals to see Nancy, her mother, before she vanished. In the days that followed, investigators returned to Annie's home twice, seizing her vehicle and meticulously gathering evidence. The details uncovered cast a quiet unease over those following the case, raising questions that have yet to be answered. What unfolded during those hours remains largely unspoken. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy spent time at her daughter's home, sharing a meal and the ordinary rhythms of family life. Later that night, she returned to her own residence. Hours passed, and she did not remain. Within a week, law enforcement arrived at Annie's property, methodically moving through the home. The first search, conducted roughly a week after Nancy's disappearance, focused on a residence 4 miles from Nancy's own home in the Catalina foothills. Officers worked with quiet precision, their movements deliberate. When they departed, evidence was secured in gloves and sealed bags, and Annie's vehicle had been impounded. Authorities framed these actions as standard procedure in cases where family members were among the last to see the missing person, yet the deliberate nature of the work carried an undeniable weight. The second search occurred on the evening of February 10th, extending late into the night. Investigators concentrated on photographing the interior, their camera flashes briefly illuminating rooms otherwise cloaked in shadow. Outside, media crews recorded the scene, their presence muted against the measured movements of law enforcement. The operation unfolded with a quiet exactness, deliberate and controlled, yet the air was heavy with questions left unresolved. Every gesture, every pause, seemed to hint at a truth held in the silence between them. The deputies arrived, carrying camera equipment and evidence bags, and entered the home with quiet purpose. For nearly 3 hours, they moved deliberately from room to room, their presence controlled, their work meticulous and silent. Every action was precise, measured, as if each step was both necessary and heavy with unspoken significance. The house, still and shadowed, seemed to absorb the weight of their investigation, leaving an atmosphere charged with questions that remained unanswered. The camera flashes moved softly through the rooms, spilling briefly into the garage and shadowed corners, each burst of light revealing only fragments of the space. When the deputies finally emerged, one still wore blue gloves, their faces unreadable, their words held in quiet restraint. The home felt empty, not just of its occupants, but of certainty. Annie Guthrie and her husband were no longer present. Reporter Brian Enton later observed that the second search appeared to unfold in close coordination with private security already stationed at the property. Their movements were measured, almost seamless, as though the investigation had been anticipated. In that quiet precision, the house seemed to hold its breath, each detail leaving a lingering sense of absence and unresolved weight. The security guards stepped back, permitting the deputies to enter unimpeded. They moved through the house with quiet purpose, carrying their camera equipment in cases, hands gloved in blue, each gesture deliberate and controlled. The rooms remained still around them, the silence heavy, as if the house itself bore witness to the careful, methodical attention of their work. It was clear the operation had been arranged beforehand. The security guards seemed to expect their arrival, and the deputies navigated the property with a practiced familiarity, entering with purpose and ease. The house stood empty and silent, yet every movement carried a measured precision, a quiet testament to careful preparation and the weight of what was being sought within its walls. The family reportedly consented to the search, yet a question lingered in the quiet spaces between the facts. Why, 7 nights after Nancy's disappearance, did investigators focus on photographing multiple rooms of Annie's home? At the same time, FBI agents methodically combed the low-lying brush around the property, scanning the terrain for any trace of evidence. On February 10th and 11th, deputies moved deliberately through the surrounding neighborhood, going door to door, distributing flyers and questioning residents about any unusual activity during the hours before Nancy vanished. Yet despite these procedural explanations, speculation spread, focused on the family's prominence, the background of Tommaso Cayenne, and the impounded vehicle. The Guthrie family remained publicly united, issuing appeals and weighing legal action against outlets reporting unverified claims. Sheriff Chris Nanos emphasized that no formal suspects had been named and that the searches aimed to cover all bases and eliminate possibilities. At the heart of the investigation was a single, stark fact. Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cayenne were the last known people to see Nancy alive. The sequence between that final interaction and the moment she disappeared became the pivot around which the investigation turned. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy left her home in the Catalina foothills and took an Uber to her daughter's residence, arriving at approximately 5:32 p.m. Footage from inside the vehicle showed her composed, in calm spirits, under no apparent distress. The driver was cooperative and was not considered a suspect. Nancy spent roughly 4 hours at Annie's home. Dinner was shared. Games were played. Family members later described the evening as ordinary, unremarkable. Around 9:48 p.m., Tommaso drove Nancy back to her own home, a journey of about 4 miles. Digital records show the garage door opened at 9:48 p.m. and closed 2 minutes later at 9:50 p.m. Tommaso reportedly waited to ensure she was safely inside before departing. Observers tracking the timeline noted the sequence with care. Initially, the sheriff attributed the drop-off to Tommaso alone, later revising the statement to indicate family, a subtle change that did not go unnoticed. After the garage door closed, the night appeared to settle into routine. Nancy was presumably inside, preparing for rest. Yet in the early hours of February 1st, anomalies emerged. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell cameras went offline. By 2:12 a.m., motion sensors recorded activity near the front entrance. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker monitoring system registered movement, indicating Nancy had traveled at least 30 feet from her phone. Within these minutes, the calm of the evening gave way to a narrow window of uncertainty that would define the investigation. The garage door had opened and closed. It appeared Nancy had entered her home, yet what followed became the most scrutinized detail of the case. Between 1:47 a.m., when the doorbell camera went offline, and 2:28 a.m., when her pacemaker recorded movement, 41 minutes unfolded largely unobserved inside the house. For an elderly woman alone, this span of time, within her own home, in the middle of the night, raised profound questions. Former FBI agents have suggested that these minutes could indicate something beyond a simple abduction. Perhaps someone moved with intent, deliberate, searching not only for a person but for something more, the purpose known only to them. In most cases of abduction, the act is swift, a matter of minutes. 41 minutes, however, suggested something else. Perhaps an error, a change of plan, or an intimate familiarity with the home itself. Nothing in that span reflected the hurried precision of a conventional kidnapping. Investigators conducted multiple interviews with Annie and Tommaso, revisiting their home, including the garage, and examining their vehicle. These steps were framed as efforts to verify the timeline, to account for every anomaly. By February 11th, no formal suspects had been named. Meanwhile, the investigation extended south to Rio Rico, Arizona, near the Mexican border. Surveillance images recovered from Nancy's tampered Google Nest doorbell depicted a masked individual, head to toe in dark clothing, gloves on their hands, a backpack fully packed, a flashlight held in the mouth, and a pistol holstered at the waist. The images offered a rare, unsettling glimpse of methodical intent. Analysts noted the backpack first. Its contents suggested preparation, possibly restraints or tools designed to control a person. Every movement was deliberate, measured. The individual approached the front door, tapped the camera lightly, then crouched to obscure the lens with vegetation. The figure's movements were precise, right-handed, medium build, not particularly tall, carrying a semi-automatic weapon. That same day, a man was briefly detained in Rio Rico during a traffic stop, questioned, and released without charges. Family members emphasized he bore no resemblance to the masked figure. Law enforcement offered few details beyond the search and detention, underscoring the absence of any confirmed suspect. The scale of the operation, roadblocks, FBI evidence teams, hours spent combing property, illustrated the seriousness of the investigation. Though proximity to the border invited speculation of cross-border involvement, authorities emphasized the case appeared deliberate, targeted, and focused. Tips continued to pour in through the FBI's $50,000 reward hotline, each one examined carefully in the effort to trace Nancy's disappearance. As leads stretched beyond Tucson, another layer of uncertainty emerged: anonymous communications to media outlets. Days after Nancy vanished, multiple ransom notes arrived via email. The first significant note, received February 3rd, demanded a substantial sum in Bitcoin, referencing details not publicly disclosed: Nancy's Apple Watch, which she had not been wearing, and a damaged floodlight at her home. Analysts described the note as deliberate and meticulously constructed, a communication meant to establish credibility. The FBI later confirmed the Apple Watch and floodlight details, signaling the sophistication, or authority, of the sender. No means of dialogue or negotiation were offered. The message was unilateral, leaving the family with one unanswerable question: is she alive? Similar notes reached other outlets, some threatening Nancy's life if demands were unmet. One California man was arrested for sending false ransom communications that mimicked the legitimate notes but lacked key insider details. He was traced, charged, and the case highlighted how misinformation could cloud an already complex investigation. Through it all, the glaring reality remained: there was no proof of life. No photographs, video, or audio confirmed Nancy's condition. Public appeals reflected this absence. Savannah Guthrie, speaking for the family, addressed the possibility that even visual evidence could be manipulated in an era of increasingly sophisticated AI deepfakes.